Chapter 13. Acceptance. Legion. Acceptance. Sometimes, accepting help is harder than offering it. Once, when he was young and his face was whole, a boy had a mother. And only in his deepest memories, as faded and darkened as they were, did he remember her once comforting touch. How, one day when he was crying, she gently caressed his head. "But you want to be a hero, don't you?" He remembers her saying, "It's okay for you to be one." Before he knew it, that was all that he remembered. Todoroki idly wondered why his thoughts were on this moment in particular, especially since he was currently flying in the air. His body roughly hit the ground and he rolled. Quickly getting to his feet, he glared at the boy. The right side of his face was burning, and he quickly applied ice to numb it. His vision was already slightly blurry at the edges, and he stumbled a bit before regaining his bearings. Where was that strength before?" "I've been saving it, as you can see." Izuku raised his hand, showing the purple, broken finger that he'd used. "It takes a lot out of me. I made a promise, Todoroki, that I wouldn't let what happened at the USJ happen again. But with what you're doing right now, all I can see are the brothers you've killed." Todoroki flinched at that, his old man's words coming back to his mind. "And the people you will." "What?" "I'm sorry about this, Todoroki," Izuku thought as he continued his spiel. "Every hero I've ever seen has given it their all. Every student here has given it their all, and you spit on all of that thinking that you can coast by with just your ice." Todoroki growled before sending a fresh wave of ice toward his opponent. "Did my old man put you up to this?" The ice completely missed its target as Izuku dodged and sped around the arena at speeds rivaling Tenya's.
"No."
"But I did just meet him. He's a real piece of work, that's for sure. Kind of reminds of you." "Ooh, that pushed some buttons." Todoroki snarled at the insinuation. "I am nothing like him." "You're right. At least he had the decency to apologize for the deaths of my brothers." Todoroki flinched as if he was struck. "Way I see it, you trying to spite him by refusing to use your fire is pointless because you've already caused harm by not using it. So when will it stop, Todoroki? Is it 'cause they're clones? Will you finally use your fire when a real person's life is on the line?" Izuku asked, the tone in his voice just daring Todoroki to answer in the wrong way. "Because the USJ can easily happen again, only this time. You won't be given a second chance." "Shut up." Another trail of ice that Izuku dodged. "How many more, Todoroki?" he said as he flipped over and almost struck him. Todoroki dodged at the last second. "How many more must die before you face the truth?" "I refuse to use his power." "Wrong answer." "Then you'll die with them." In a flash of green lightning, Izuku kicked Todoroki straight in the chest, sending him back again. "Shoto." Todoroki rolled back and tried to unleash another large attack, but was kicked in the face. "Those huge attacks leave you open." Todoroki grunted as he impacted against one of the ice walls that he'd created earlier before screaming as Izuku kicked him in the gut and straight through the ice. His mind temporarily went blank. "Stand up already. If you're down by something like this, forget beating All Might." He remembers as he lay there retching. "Please, stop. He's only 5. He's already 5. Get out of my way." Smack. "Ah. Mom. Why am I remembering this now?" Todoroki retched onto the ground, while staining it as he desperately tried to regain his breath. "Use your fire," Izuku demanded.
No."
The emerald lightning disappeared, and in its place, a gun was placed to his temple. The world froze. "Midnight, don't call it." He heard Izuku call out before he heard it fire. He flinched, but seeing that he was still conscious, turned and saw the scorch mark on the cement next to him. "That's one. Use your fire." "And no." Izuku narrowed his eyes before rearing back his foot and kicking Todoroki across the face, sending him sprawling. Another shot impacted the concrete to his right, burning his ear with its closeness. "That's 2. Use your fire."
"No."
Ice shot up from his right side and Izuku was forced to jump back. The ice nearly reached him, but Izuku sacrificed another finger, sending it sprawling away. Todoroki found himself on the ground once more. Izuku's foot stomping onto his chest, knocking the breath out of him. Another shot. That's 3, Todoroki. That's 3 people you've killed because you refused to use your fire to save them. And as it is, you're practically frozen from the inside out. I wonder what could fix that? Todoroki was taken aback, now seeing Izuku's goal with the shots. Use it, he growled. Todoroki dived deep within himself, preparing a monstrous attack. He just needed a bit more time. Why? Because everybody's giving it their all, Todoroki. And I refuse to let more people die. I want to bring them hope. I can see it within you, Todoroki. The struggle, the fear, the anger. It's what I've dealt with for years. It's what I'm dealing with now. I want to save you, Todoroki. I want to bring you hope, but you have to take the first step. You have to use your fire. Izuku warned as he pressed even further, his left leg almost crushing Todoroki's rib cage as Izuku held the gun to the side. I won't. 2. That was a child, Todoroki, and they looked up to you. They looked up to the hero. Izuku spat the word out like it was a curse. Todoroki Shoto, and he let them die, all because of some asinine vow, because he thought he could become a half-assed hero just to spite his father. Todoroki could see it, and that's what scared him. The same child with his face, unmarred and then broken. The same child that once wanted to play with his sibling but would later be dragged away for more training. Don't look at that, Shoto. They're from a different world than you. Shut up. Once more the stadium was shadowed in ice as another glacier worthy of the Ice Age erupted into existence. Todoroki panted and shivered violently as he got up to his feet, the symptoms of hypothermia affecting his right side severely. It's finished. Call the match, Midnight. I proved him wrong. Did you? Todoroki started as Midoriya appeared to his right. He instinctively raised his left arm, which Midoriya knocked down with his ice-covered right. Todoroki tried to grab Midoriya with his right hand, but Midoriya grabbed his wrist and wrenched it back. Todoroki tried to capitulate, but almost no ice came from his hand. Midoriya then smacked him with his right arm, the ice bludgeoning him and the impact sending him crashing back first into one of the many stalagmites that had been created into the ground, his right side heavily injured by the impact. He remembers a child crying, I don't want to, Mom, I don't want to be like Dad. I don't want to be someone who bullies you, Mom. But you want to be a hero, don't you? He looked up and peered at her with confused eyes. It's okay for you to be one, as long as you have a future you feel strongly about. A second wind came into Todoroki as he decided to go for close-quarters combat, delivering a multitude of strikes into Izuku's abdomen before delivering a right uppercut that sent pain through every nerve. Shoto! Todoroki screamed in pain before a left hook shut him up, making his teeth crack and his vision blur. A hand grabbed his shoulder and wrenched him back to face Midoriya, who grabbed him by the shirt and lifted him. Emerald lightning surged again as Izuku raised his ice-covered arm and slammed it into Todoroki, the ice shattering from the force and brutally spiking Todoroki into the ground. His vision temporarily goes black. Mom, I'm going crazy. He remembers overhearing, on the day that changed everything. I can't take it anymore. Every day the children seem to become more and more like him. Shoto, that child's left side sometimes looks very unsightly to me. I can't raise him anymore. I feel like I shouldn't. Mom? The tea kettle whistled. Todoroki's vision blurred even more as he lay there on the ground, the nondescript faces of the crowd merging into one colorful blob. With a weak groan, he started to crawl, forced to lean on his left side. He extended his right arm, trying to do something, anything, but he was helpless. Izuku grabbed his right leg by the ankle, the strength of his grip almost crushing it. Todoroki knew that he could hear bones crack. Dragging Todoroki, he then used the centrifugal force of his swing to slam Todoroki into another one of his ice walls, the damage to his right side increasing even more. He's breaking my right side. That was his plan all along. The worst part was how Izuku treated him, ragdolling Todoroki as such a simple thing, as if no effort was required. Todoroki felt himself crash into some more ice chunks along the way as his body was dragged across the stage. Izuku abruptly let him go, his own momentum making him splay out onto the ground with a groan. Good grief, this is an important time too. Where's Mom? A bandaged child asked. Oh, she injured you, so I put her in a hospital. It's your fault. You're the one that made Mom. Izuku grabbed him and held him up once more, his feet dangling off the ground and ever so close to the boundary. One more chance, Todoroki. Use your fire. I can't. He needed to prove it, that he could become a hero with just her power. He needed to show her. I will reject his power. He whispered as he weakly grasped at his arm with his left. Izuku merely shook his head. When will you realize, Todoroki? It was never his? Todoroki gasped. It's yours. Once, when he was young and his face was whole, Todoroki had a mother. And only in his deepest memories, as faded and darkened as they were, did he remember her once comforting touch. How, one day, when they were together, they watched an interview. Yes, that's right. Children inherit quirks from their parents. But the really important thing is not that connection, but recognizing your own flesh and blood. Recognizing yourself? All Might said with his signature smile and his thumbs up. That's what I mean when I say, I am here. You see? Once, Shoto Todoroki had a mother, and she told him, but you want to be a hero, don't you? It's okay for you to be one. Before I knew it, I had forgotten. You don't have to be a prisoner of your blood. Steam started to waft off of his right side, and smoke began to rise from his left. It's okay for you to become who you want to be. And Todoroki burned. Earlier, from the sidelines, everybody watched with anticipation as the two powerhouses from 1A stood off. Inko was, of course, extremely worried. She'd heard from the vote about what had happened at the USJ, and she hoped that Izuku wouldn't give in to his anger. She had confidence in her boy, and she knew that he could win. Although he'd certainly given her more than a few heart attacks throughout this whole festival. But she was also worried about what would come after. She loved Mitsuki like a sister, but there had been a considerable rift formed between them when she found out what her son had been doing to her own. How very little had changed even when Django was there. They watched as Izuku was nearly consumed by ice, before it stopped, and reversed direction with extreme force. And Todoroki starts off with his signature attack, but Midoriya pushes it back with a flick of his finger. Where was this before? Holy crap, Inko. Your kid had that up his sleeve the entire time? You should have told me. Mitsuki yelled. Inko merely smiled coyly. Have to have some secrets, don't I? She replied before turning to Yagi. Tashinori, is this what you meant earlier? She whispered. Tashinori merely nodded, paying almost exclusive attention to the fight. And Midoriya comes to Todoroki right with a blinding left hook. She cheered as she saw the Vode start to roar, slamming their chest plates as they cheered for him. They watched as the two continued to fight, and cheered as Izuku delivered 3 kicks in a row, the last one blasting the other boy through the ice. The cheering stopped as he pulled out the gun. Use your fire. Looks like VOD's angry, and wants Todoroki to go all out. Hisashi was surprised, but turned to look at Cody, who motioned to keep the mic on. They kept on the byplay between the two of them, and Cody provided a bit more perspective on what was happening for the audience. It's like Izuku said earlier, he wants everybody to give it their all. From the students in Gen Ed to his friends in the hero course. Izuku wants the best out of all of them. I don't know what they're saying, but Izuku just wants Todoroki to give everything he's got. The crowd started to murmur, and even some pros considered the words. I mean, what kind of hero doesn't give it their all? Isn't he also their class president? I guess you could say that he's looking out for him. I wonder why he's not using his full power, though. Elsewhere in the stands, Kyoka shivered as she heard Izuku's words and the meaning behind them. Kyoka, are you all right, Monami? Yuga asked. She nodded but still looked worried. Yeah, You can hear what they're saying, Non? Yeah, it's not the best. Don't worry. Nobody will ask you to reveal their secrets. Thanks, Yuga. As Cody explained, the crowd started to get excited at the potential full-power fight. Then the stadium became Antarctica. Kyoka idly heard Sue's croaks and shivers. Fortunately, she was being warmed up by their classmates. Momo had created a bunch of blankets for her after the last time this had happened. Is, Midoriya down? They heard Present Mike ask, the quietest she'd ever heard him. Then they saw him move. No, he's not. Didn't escape unscathed, but that's not stopping him. Then they watched the brutal dismantling of their classmate. Damn, Midoriya really said that these hands be rated T for Todoroki? Kaminari mumbled. She hated how she found that funny. And Midoriya spikes Todoroki into the ground, breaking the ice off his arm at the same time. Boy, does that have to hurt. You know, this kind of reminds me of those old pre-quirk wrestling shows. And Midoriya's dragging Todoroki to the edge, slamming him into his own ice. Now he's holding him up in the air. Is this a final chance? Kyoka listened as they traded a few words, and apparently, Izuku must have said something triggering because she could hear Todoroki's gasp. And everybody could see Todoroki suddenly burn. This is... Back to where the families were, Inko was fearfully clutching Toshinori's arm as he realized Izuku's strategy. You broke his right side and forced him to use his left. Izuku, have you been trying to save Todoroki since the beginning? Looking to the other side, he saw Izuku standing tall, his body burnt from being so close to the eruption. Smiling. I'm so proud. Even though you want to win, damn it. You'd help your enemy? Now, who's screwing around? Todoroki asked as Izuku grinned from across the stage. That's the thing, Todoroki. You never were my enemy. You're right. I want to be a hero too. And for once, they both smiled. Shoto. The audience heard as Endeavor started to walk down the steps. Huh. They heard Present Mike ask, both of them realizing that this was the first time they could hear him after being so focused on their fight. Have you finally accepted yourself? That's it. Good. It all starts from here for you. With my blood, you will surpass me and fulfill my desire. Todoroki barely heard a word. He'd forgotten all about him. Endeavor suddenly shouts encouragement.
Mick wondered.
Such a doting father. Izuku kept smiling, proud that he'd managed to break through. Wow. With everything you've done, even to the point of injuring yourself. Just for this? You're crazy. Izuku merely chuckled. I've got about 10,000 voices in my head agreeing with you. Shoto took a deep breath. I'm sorry about your brothers. I didn't mean to kill them. I was stubborn and I'm sorry. I know, and I forgive you. I'm not the only one you should apologize to. Izuku reminded him. I know, he said as he stumbled forward, hissing as he felt his body twinge in pain. You really did a number on my right side. Sorry about that. Didn't really know what else to do that didn't involve me hurting myself. I don't blame you, you were right. I haven't given it my all, but I will now. Then I'll do the same. Forcing himself to take another step, Todoroki ignited half-hot, half-cold as ice surged from his right side and fire roared from his left. Izuku let one for all charge throughout his entire body, emerald lightning surging as red veins decorated his body. Midnight. Cementos yelled as he surged cement throughout the stage. If this keeps going, it'll be bad for the both of them. An explosion of this size? Midnight commented as she released Somnambulist. A tsunami of ice erupted forward as it raced towards Izuku, who leaped over it, deciding to give it his all. He allowed 100% of one for all to surge into his right arm, making it so that a veritable lightning storm was wrapped around his fist. Let's go, Todoroki. Come at me with your full power. The fire began to melt the ice at rapid speed. Todoroki raised his hand, ready to meet Izuku head-on. Midoriya, Shoto muttered, charging up for his last attack. Thank you. He finished, filled with hope. The cement barely came up in time. The explosion that followed could not sufficiently be put into words. The cement walls that had been hastily raised were eradicated, utterly erased from existence as the cold air rapidly expanded from the heat. The force from Izuku's punch also added hurricane force winds into the mix, causing the audience to have to take cover. Even his Vode were unscathed, knocked down by them. Midnight had been flipped ass over Tea Kettle, and Mineta had to be held by Shoji to not fly away. Outside, all the heroes paused, gaping in shock as they stared at the smoke that was rising from the stadium. Over in the other stadiums, they also paused as they saw the smoke rising in the distance. From below, Cementos idly admired the destruction caused as present Mike continued his commentary, Aizawa explaining the explosion. As Midnight got up from her fall, she too looked into the smoke to see the winner. The families were utterly surprised at seeing the power held by the boy whose brothers had saved their children. Ainko, she heard Mitsuki stutter, and wasn't that its own surprise. I think your kid is crazier than mine. Inko chuckled half-heartedly, but couldn't tear her eyes away from the stage, waiting to see where Izuku was. Toshi? Toshinori breathed deeply, his senses finally attuned after decades of hero work. He pointed. There. From the smoke, a fist poked through, and Izuku stood tall. Cradled in his arm was an unconscious Todoroki. Todoroki is unconscious. Midoriya wins. The stadium erupted into a cacophony, the crowd excited beyond all measure. And in a hurricane-like finisher, Midoriya comes out on top. Can nothing stop this man? Eraser. What the hell is up with your class? VOD. 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 Kote. VOD. The chanting began from the VOD. Even Cody joined in from the announcer's box as they all raised and pumped their fists in homage to Izuku. Todoroki slowly returned to consciousness. His body was extremely sore from pretty much everything. Midoriya. Todoroki. Man, you're tough to get up from that. I could say the same about you. He mumbled as Izuku helped him stand on his feet. Todoroki, will you raise your fist with mine? Todoroki paused and nodded. Yes. Raising his left fist, his right was far too broken. Todoroki faced the cheering crowd for a few moments before stumbling. And again, Midoriya raises his fists with his opponent. What an inspiration. Izuku helped Todoroki get onto the stretcher held by the Metaclones, who nodded to their brother and took off, him following behind. Todoroki groaned a bit from the pain, but needed to start with this. Vode, I'm sorry about your brothers. About what I did. When I get the chance, I'll apologize to each and every one of you. He finished before falling unconscious again. The two clones looked at each other before nodding and continued to make their way to Recovery Girl's temporary office. All right. Well, we kind of have to fix the stage now. So let's all take a nice break, Mike said before turning to the others after turning off the mic. Smack. Ow. Damn it, RG. Izuku cried out, helpless to do anything against Recovery Girl's assault on his shins. You don't get to say anything. Not only did you shatter your arm and fingers, you broke so many bones on Todoroki's right side it's a miracle he's even conscious. Just 'cause I told you to lessen the damage, doesn't mean that there needs to be an equivalent exchange onto your opponent. She finished her tirade with another smack. Ow. Damn it, woman. Didn't you take the Hippocratic Oath? Consider this my personal prescription for your diagnosis. Unrelenting idiocy. So mean. After a minute, though, he stopped with the jesting and looked at Todoroki, who was currently occupying the Bacta chamber. Will he be all right? He'll be fine. Just used up too much energy for me to heal him in one go. The Bacta will deal with the worst of it until he can get back up on his feet. Then I'll put some food in him and heal him back up. As Izuku stared at the Bacta, however, another thought came to mind. Recovery Girl? Yes. Do you think that Bacta can be used to heal, Yagi? She finished as they both stared at the pod. Yeah. I want to believe that it can, Midoriya. It's already done healing on par with mine, albeit on a slower scale. I want to believe that with frequent sessions, Yagi could get better. But we're talking about cellular regeneration on a massive scale. Organs being reconstructed from the tiniest amount of material still available. Skin tissue being regenerated, surgeries being reversed. She shuddered as she went through the explanation, one hand on the pod and her mind half on the events that led to Toshinori being reduced to his current state. She knew that she'd saved his life, but at great cost. Maybe now they could reduce that cost. Izuku came up to her, one hand on her shoulder. I think it'd be good for us to at least try, right? Recovery Girl nodded. All right, that's enough out of me, and don't bother trying to hide that yawn. You've got plenty of time to rest until the finals since they're rebuilding the stage. Eat, then rest. Aye. All for one smiled as he observed Tamura pay attention to his self-proclaimed player too. While of course, He could not see the sports festival with his own eyes. That did not inhibit him in the slightest. Plus, that foolish cockatoo of a hero's commentary was more than helpful. And surprisingly enough, the clones as well. All for one, throughout all his years, had never managed to get a true sentient quirk into his collection. The last time he had attempted so, the creature had lashed out and had destroyed itself, unfortunately taking a few of his collection along with him. Since then he'd never dared, although the temptation was great. Those kinds of quirks were just so unique. All for one had a suspicion, however, as to the nature of this particular quirk. Something familiar, and in more ways than one. Heh, how ironic. So, little brother, looks like you've found another. He idly observed the boy, and judging by what he was hearing and seeing, the boy certainly had a lot of potential. He also was firmly entrenched in the follies of heroism. Yet his actions, his words, his ideals, so much potential. Already stirring up trouble. Oh yes, he'd already heard about the HPSC's efforts to stymie the young boy's career, halted as they were by Nizu. And then the whispers. The sheep were oh so comfortable in their calm pastures, fenced in by their laws and protected by their shepherds. For one of their own to start cracking the fence. Bah, he was delving too much into metaphors. Either way, Midoriya Izuku was pushing against the status quo, and it was pushing back. It would only be a matter of time until one would break. But which one? Tamura idly scratched his neck as he forced himself to observe. While he'd rather be playing his video games, he admitted that this was pretty good info. Kurogyri had compared it to him reading one of his magazines to finally find out where the hidden secrets were to his favorite games. That had made it more bearable. Stupid hidden achievement. But as he watched Player 2, Midoriya Izuku, he could see what was hidden behind that fake smile, behind those taunting fists. Anger. A whole lot of anger. And it looked like he didn't like Hero Society too. Taking a single-player campaign and turning it into a team run, destroying the 10 million and causing absolute chaos to the masses. The chaos he wanted to cause. Then the 1v1s. He admitted that he was actually feeling disappointed at his near loss until he managed to turn it around. Then he took out the purple-haired kid and utterly crushed the blonde. Then, the fight against Endeavor's brat. The sheer brutality. Midoriya had utterly manhandled his opponent, and even when he pulled out his secret technique, Midoriya still managed to stay on top. But what was most interesting was the moment that made everyone go silent. When he pulled a gun out and pointed it at the other boy. The words were muddled, but Tamura knew that it was important. Midoriya was angry, infuriated about something. More than likely something that happened at the USJ after he'd left. So many hidden secrets, it was a shame that Kurogyri couldn't go digging into UA again. Perhaps there were other options? He'd certainly like to know more, but for now, he had an intermission to watch. Finishing up the semifinals, it's 1B's last chance to make it to the end. He's been cutting through the competition dash. That pun was horrible. And he's itching for a fight. Kamakiri Tagaru. Beat his ass, Kamakiri. Monoma frothed at the mouth, still sore over his humiliating defeat. Kendo was quick to chop him down. And from 1A, the bombing king of UA, will he rise to the top to challenge Midoriya, or will he fall just short of the mark? It's Bakugo Katsuki. The crowd roared for both of them, and both were eagerly anticipating the fight. Katsuki snarled but grinned. He was gunning for Deku, but he had a feeling that it would be a good fight. Start. Katsuki immediately started with an explosion, while Kamakiri turned into a tornado of blades. The two impacted brutally, and Katsuji found himself turned back. What the dash? Katsuki was immediately forced to dodge, the edge of one of Kamakiri's blades nicking his face and shaving off the edges of his hair. Katsuki launched another explosion, greater than the first, but missed as Kamakiri dodged to the side at an unnatural angle. How the dash? Katsuki almost bit his tongue as he dodged another blade as Kamakiri grinned wildly. Gotta thank Hatsune. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't know my body's limits. Kamakiri struck multiple times, with Katsuki using his explosions to escape his blades and gain some distance. He snarled, his pride stung at having been forced to move backward. He couldn't believe how much things had turned around. Kamakiri pressed his advantage, turning into a tornado of terror as he constantly pushed against his opponent, refusing to let up and thus giving Katsuki very short time to actually fight back. Katsuki, however, was far from done, and he refused to let another extra get in way of his rightful victory. Katsuki let out a large explosion, but this time put more flash instead. Kamakiri stumbled, blinded by the impromptu flashbang. Using the opportunity, Katsuki snarled and braced his left arm. Kaboom! A monstrous explosion ripped out of his arm, tearing his shoulder from its socket. Katsuki grit his teeth, snarling and panting like a wild animal, clutching his arm in pain but refusing to fall. He would never fall. The smoke cleared, and it was only Katsuki's sharp instincts that let him dodge that blade that nearly cut his face.
Impossible.
That wasn't enough? When would these extras just stay down? Kamakiri turned, already spinning for another attack that he wouldn't be able to dodge. Katsuki tried to lift his arm, but couldn't as pain spiked through his body. Whoosh! The blade went wide as Kamakiri stumbled and fell on his back, unconscious. His body was severely burned and was smoking from where the explosion had caused the most damage. Katsuki could only stare, frozen in shock. Bakugo wins. He moves on to face Midoriya in the finals. The smoke had cleared completely, showing deep gouges in the concrete where Kamakiri had braced himself thoroughly by flooding his body with blades. He had barely moved a few feet. Katsuki could only stare in shock as his fallen opponent was wheeled off to Recovery Girl's office, idly walking away, ignoring the crowd that was cheering for him. That was my biggest explosion yet. He clenched his fist, unable to raise it. Tisage, and while we fix things up, feel free to stock up on snacks. Izuku could hear Present Mike talking yet paid no mind to it. He sat in his room, pondering. Bakugo's last fight had been interesting to say the least. He could see, however, that the aftermath had shaken him. Seeing two opponents who he'd obviously deem extras simply tank his explosions like they were nothing, although they eventually fell in the end, would greatly affect his psyche. He could use that to his advantage. He could. Oh, who was he kidding? He could try and analyze this as impartially as he could, but in truth he was worried about the fight. Not because of the battle itself, but what would happen after. He knew that the outcome of today would change things irrevocably. And truth be told, Bakugo unfortunately was a major source of his anger. So many conflicts throughout the years, so much anger and vitriol, and for what? For what possible reason could he be like this? What had he done to deserve such hatred? They were brothers once, before the betrayal. But then Django was there, and now he was gone. His brother, his friend, his only comfort throughout the rough years of his childhood. 5 years of his constant presence, and now he was gone. I wish you were here, brother. I feel so lost without you. A broken body, cracked helmet, blood flooding the ground. Rattan Eliot. Suddenly, the dark memories were washed away, and he felt a presence. Near him, comforting him. Although it was similar to Django's comfort, this felt more motherly. How odd. Either way, Izuku was thankful for the change in his thoughts. Right now he needed to focus. This time, the fight with Bakugo would not need a cheap trick. Today, he would face Bakugo head-on and finally win with his own strength. And maybe finally, just finally, he could let go of him. Kachin. Izuku shook his head and snorted in derision. The past was in the past, and the friend that once bore that name was long dead. The light turned green in his room. Now, it was time to fight. As he rose, he felt the comforting presence leave him. Although he'd like to know more about it, he couldn't put too much attention to it. A part of him wanted to believe that it was his brothers, still in the mindscape cheering him on. But this was different. No matter, he had a fight to win. Izuku. A whisper echoed, unheard by him. Everybody. It's time. The match that you've all been waiting for. He's been taking first place since the beginning. Will he get the hat trick and bring home the gold? The Legion hero of 1A. Midoriya Izuku. The crowd deafened his ears as he stared ahead at his opponent, coldly analyzing him, the slightest flickers of anger pooling in his heart. VOD, 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 VOD. The clones pounded their armor with each cry for their brother. And the challenger, rising up from the ashes of his opponents, all to take down the would-be champion. Will he snatch the gold from his opponent's grasp? It's one. Bombing king, Bakugo Katsuki. The crowd hadn't stopped cheering, eagerly waiting for the ensuing fight. Something was odd, however. It was savage, brutal, and spoken with derision from all the VOD that littered the stadium. But one word. Aruetai, Arueti, Arueti. From above in the announcer's box, Aizawa and Hizashi looked at each in concern. They knew that Bakugo and the Midoriyas had some bad blood between them. But how bad was it? Cody, what is that word? Hizashi questioned, turning to the younger man in concern. Arueti, he muttered, merely staring coldly at the stage before them. And what does it mean? Aizawa asked, almost afraid to do so. Cody remained silent. The two were now very worried about this fight. Hey, Inko? Mitsuki slightly nudged her shoulder. Yes, Mitsuki? The blonde sadly gazed at the two boys in front of them. You seeing the same thing I am? She sadly asked. Yes. Inko whispered as she nodded sadly. They really haven't been friends for a long time, have they? Django used to call him Arueti, Mitsuki. What does that mean? It means betrayer. Just in case you were wondering. Izuku snarked as he clenched his fist. Bakugo's eye twitched as he snarled in return. You and your clones have a lot of nerve. Always looking down on me, that piece of shit you called a brother, and the ones that dared to shoot me back at the USJ. Midnight was about ready to drop her crop, but Izuku raised his hand. Surprisingly enough, she waited. You mean the ones that saved your life? After your dumbass almost got yourself killed going against the Nomu? Izuku snapped back. I could have killed that thing myself if you and your damn clones hadn't interfered. You're an idiot. Izuku seethed. My brothers died to save your ass, and all you can think about is your overblown ego. Your clones are just as worthless as you, Deku. If I'd been there, at least they wouldn't have died, especially that upstart extra. Izuku's eye twitched as unpleasant memories started coming back. Blood, broken bodies, death, fear, anger, hatred, clones that were crippled, only just now being able to be healed by Recovery Girl. Nightmares that plagued him every night. The death screams of over 1,000 of his brothers. The emptiness in his heart. A clone that came back with cracked armor and familiar scorch marks. Django.
Ratim vode.
Izuku snapped back to reality as sheer fury welled through him. Screw it. How about a deal? Midnight, make it so that the match doesn't count ringouts or anything. Just unconsciousness. Just a straight-up fight to the end. How about that, Arueti? Izuku growled, using the term against him for the first time ever. Bakugo laughed. For once, I like the way you think, Deku. Midnight? Midnight stuttered before nodding. Both participants have agreed to a no-holds-barred match. Ringouts won't count. Only until one is fully unconscious will a victor be declared. The crowd started to cheer even louder at that. The two fighters glared at each other, and Izuku was itching to finally knock Bakugo down a peg. You should have just stayed out of my way like the pebble you are, Deku. Shut up already and make me. You'll fail to stop me just like you did all the other times.
Fight.
Bakugo, angry beyond all measure, launched an explosion point blank. D. Smoke and fire covered the stage before a flash of green pierced it and a fist buried itself into Bakugo's gut. Ku. Bakugo stayed there, folded over Izuku's fist as he roared and punched forward, launching him out of the arena and to the grass away. Izuku panted and grimaced, 20% of One for All flowing through him at the moment, just barely restraining himself to 10% at the moment of impact. Already his skin had split in some places, the slightest trickles of blood flowing down his legs, staining his pants. Izuku cracked his neck and jumped. Bakugo could barely breathe. The surprise attack had knocked the wind out of him, and even worse, he'd been sent out onto the grass in a single attack. That DKU. He made the deal just to show me up. I'll teach him a lesson for looking down on me. Then he heard the roar. Looking up, he saw Deku coming down on him, ready to punch him into the ground. Rolling over, He launched an explosion to dodge out of the way before sending another combined explosion to launch Deku back. You don't have that damn clone to hide behind anymore, Deku? He yelled as he blasted forward and tackled the other boy. The two fell into a pile of limbs, Bakugo rolling on top and punching Deku with his explosions. Izuku blocked as best as he could, before finally managing to grab his arms and buck him off. Rolling to his feet, he let his quirk flow back to 15%, letting him get to Bakugo before he could fully rise. As a testament to his instincts, Bakugo was already on the move, launching his classic left hook. It did not work. With a crushing grip, Izuku forced the explosion into the air before brutally backhanding Bakugo, stunning him. You think Django was my shield? With a yell, he slammed Bakugo into the ground from over his shoulder, the latter gasping in pain at the brutal impact. Django wasn't protecting me. Izuku then placed his foot on Bakugo's chest, arm still in hand. He was holding me back, and pulled. Pop. Arg. Bakugo screamed as Izuku coldly stared at him. I've studied you for years, Bakugo. I know your every move, your every tactic. So many ways I could have fought back, really fought back. I might not have had the strength then, but I certainly do now. But back then, Django convinced me to ignore you, to leave you alone, to leave things be. But you never did. He finished with a whisper before rearing back and kicking him. Bakugo rolled across the grass, and Izuku stumbled. The previous strain throughout the day and jumping his quirk up to 10 to 20% hadn't done him any favors. Coughing into his fist, he grimaced as he saw the blood decorating it. Recovery Girl was gonna tear him a new one. Stop. Crap, I can't move. I can only brace. Looking down on me. Izuku screamed as he was sent flying back towards the arena, Bakugo's explosion scorching away at his jacket. Izuku's vision started to fade, but he grit his teeth and forced himself to his feet. I refuse to fall, he whispered to himself. Rising to his feet, he glared at Bakugo, who glared right back. You should have just stayed out of my way. But you and that damn clone just refused to stay down. I'll beat you down so badly that you and your clones will never want to be heroes again. Bakugo growled, his arm limp to his body. Izuku chuckled. And you'll fail again and again, just like the other times you tried to make us stop. I'll never stop being a hero. I'll never stop being in your way. You can do whatever, Bakugo, but I'll never stop. I'll become a symbol of hope. He roared with pure conviction, drops of blood splattering the cement. Bakugo twitched. Deku, that kind of talk just pisses me off. Bakugo screamed as he charged him. Good. Izuku roared back as he met him halfway. The two met in a flurry of punches and explosions. I'll never quit. I refuse to surrender to you. Izuku yelled as he punched Bakugo in the face. Gore. And look where that got you. You were too weak to even fight back, and now your clones are dead. Django is dead because of you. Izuku stilled before lashing out with a fist. You don't get to mention them. A punch to the chest. You don't have the right to say their names. A knee to his leg. You don't have the right to say his name. A headbutt. You don't have the right.
En explosion. Kayak.
And you don't have the right to be a hero. Bakugo dragged Izuku by his arm, forcing himself to use his left. He spun and tossed Izuku away with an explosion-enhanced throw. You are beneath me. Izuku landed roughly on his back, the edges of his vision going black. Stubbornly turning to his front and getting on his hands and knees, he forced his body to rise. I have to get up. Blood dripped onto the ground in front of him, his vision blurring and his ears ringing. I have to beat him. He stumbled onto his feet, pure rage fueling his body at Bakugo's words. I have to avenge them. He shakily looked forward, seeing Bakugo also getting up, his last explosion also hurting him. The mere sight of him made him inexplicably angry. I have to dash. Izuku breathed in. Snap. The world went dark. You have a lot of anger in you, Izuku. Izuku gasped as he woke up in the mindscape, but it was different. Darker, with shadows all over the place. Looking around, his attention was caught by a beautiful woman who smiled sadly at him. He recognized her. All Might had shown him a picture of her only a few days ago. Shimura Nana. With a start, he touched his face, only to see himself as a part of the shadows themselves. Don't worry, you'll be able to speak soon, I hope. You're inside One for All right now. We're connected to the mindscape, but this section is dependent on how much control of it you have. Eventually, as you grow stronger, more of yourself will appear, she explained before patting a shadowy seat next to her. Here, come sit with me. Izuku warily looked at her, before shrugging. If he was here, then that means that he probably lost the fight. It was a bitter pill to swallow. Don't worry, you haven't lost yet. Time here can be relative if we choose it. Why, you're not even unconscious. Just spacing out for a bit. Izuku narrowed his eyes, already itching to get back out there, and finally beat Bakugo. You know, all that anger isn't good for you. Izuku blinked as he looked at the woman next to him. I know you're angry, Izuku, at the world, at those villains, and especially at that boy. But you can't let your anger control you. That's how you spiked One for All to 20%. That combined with Legion is putting strain on your heart. Izuku gasped as well as one could without a mouth and his eyes turned to the ground. He started to shake and breathed heavily through his nose. But how am I supposed to get rid of this anger? I bet you're wondering how to get rid of that anger, right? Izuku jerked in surprise, and Nana merely laughed. You remind me of Toshi. Whenever he saw some injustice, he'd always get that anger in his eyes. Izuku's eyes softened ever so little at the mention of his beer. I found it really sweet how you've basically adopted each other. Now he was blushing. Could she even see the red through the black? He sure hoped not. I know what it feels like to be angry, Izuku. To be so angry that I wanted nothing more than revenge. I lost my husband to the same monster that killed me and hurt Toshi. Izuku turned to her in shock. He hadn't heard about this before. To protect my son, I sent him away to be adopted. I don't know what happened to him. After that, I took All Might with me, and we trained harder than ever. In my anger, I became blinded, and that led to my death, with him watching on. Nana sadly reminisced as she looked off into the distant void, lost in memories. My second son had to watch his mother die. Izuku stared at her in shock. She'd felt the same way about All Might. He too became angry, and in his fight 5 years ago, his anger was what led to him being scarred. She then turned to him and held his face. Her touch was soothing. I don't want the same thing to happen to you, she softly murmured as Izuku looked down in shame. It was true. He had been blinded by his anger, and look where it got him. Eventually, you'll learn to let go of the pain that's in your heart, Ahon, right? But first you must release your anger, and to do that, you must grieve. Izuku looked up sharply at her. How could she say that he hadn't grieved? What else had he been doing throughout these last 2 weeks? You know that what you've been doing isn't proper grief. You've been bottling up your emotions, keeping yourself in check with only a few minor outbursts like with that Ochako girl. She corrected as she held his shoulders, which were starting to tremble. Izuku fell to his knees, shaking as he tried to hold it in. Nana gently knelt in front of him and held him close. It's okay, Izuku. He closed his eyes, clenching them tightly. You can let go now, for as long as you need to. Drip, drop, drop, and Izuku did so. With a shudder, he finally let out all the emotions that he'd been holding back for weeks. All the pain, the fear, the rage and suffering. All of his grief and misery. All of his love for Django. I miss you so much, VOD. Heart-wrenching and violent, yet silent sobs echoed from his body as he gave into Nana's embrace. For however long it took, Izuku Midoriya finally grieved. After what seemed like hours, yet were only minutes within a second, Izuku lifted up his tired gaze into Nana's own sad eyes and nodded in gratitude. He felt lighter, still pained, but lighter, and he finally understood why the nightmares were going away. Thank you, Nana. You're welcome, Izuku. Now, you have a fight to get back to. I know that Bakugo boy is a pain in the ass, especially after what he did, but this is your fight. It's something you have to finish. Just remember, you're not alone anymore. You haven't been for a long time. Stepping back from him, Nana smiled widely. Don't forget to smile. After all, the strongest are those who always smile. Izuku nodded, starting to notice that white was starting to peek through the shadows. Tell Toshinori that I love him, that I don't blame him for my death, and tell him this, she whispered as she started to disappear.
Toshinori ni kartaugal saade.
I know your name is my child. Izuku nodded rapidly as the mindscape disappeared. Thank you, Nana, he whispered. She smiled. Good luck, Nine. Izuku breathed out. Again he found himself in front of his old friend turned enemy. But as he looked at him, he felt nothing, and Izuku smiled, because he could finally let go. What's that grin for, Deku? You finally snap? Izuku chuckled before he planted his feet. The strongest are those who always smile, Bakugo.
Ah?
You're looking down on me again, even after the beat down I gave you. Izuku snorted and shook his head. Of course he wouldn't understand. Never mind. Let's finish this, once and for all, Bakugo. Izuku challenged as One for All surged through him one last time. One for all, Beskergam. Full armor, he commanded with a whisper, and like armor, the power surged protectively over him, the slightest hint of Nana's embrace being felt within him as red veins glowed on his body, the slightest hints of lightning surging around him. I couldn't agree more. Bakugo roared as he faced his palms down and exploded, flying into the air. Placing his hands strategically, he started to explode and spin, a mini tornado appearing around him as he prepared for one final glorious explosion. Planting his feet, Izuku prepared to meet the attack in turn, power surging through his right arm. Goodbye, Bakugo, he thought to himself.
Vode.
Howitzer.
N.
Impact.
Smash.
Izuku's uppercut met Bakugo's explosion head-on, the entire arena turning into a tornado in response, as two opposing forces collided in a brutal impact that rocked the stadium. Cement blocks that had risen up to defend had been shattered, people had been blown away. Once again Mineta had to be held, so that he wouldn't be sent flying like a cow in Oklahoma. Goodbye, Django, Izuku whispered as he finally let go. Thank you. It's the final attack of the ages. Midoriya and Bakugo went for one final blow, the smokes clearing out of the arena. Who's still standing? Katsuki idly noticed that he could hear Present Mike again. He hadn't really been paying attention to the commentary throughout his fight with Deku. Due to the angle of his attack, he'd flown almost straight up in the sky when their attacks collided, and he'd been thrown brutally to the ground in almost a straight line, although fortunately, his impact had been buffeted by the winds. As it was though, his body was screaming in pain. He could barely blink, let alone move. He knew, however, that Deku had to have fallen. There was no way that he should still be standing after that. The smoke started to clear, and Katsuki's heart stopped. There, a shadow within the fog, a body still straight. It couldn't be. It was impossible. But there he was, standing defiant and tall, with his broken fist still raised in the air and his head bowed, back slightly hunched over as if he was leaning on something, unmoving and unrelenting, never falling, never staying down. Damn you, Deku, Katsuki growled as he tried to get up, to force his body to obey his will. The crowd already cheering. He refused to lose to Deku. Midoriya's still standing. It's unbelievable. He's still standing. And look, Bakugo's still conscious too. Aching Tio get back up while Midoriya is still standing. Plip, plop, plap. Katsuki stopped to stare at the water droplets that had fallen to the ground before forcing himself to look up at the sky. Clouds. Soon enough, a slight drizzle began to fall over them all. It's raining? But today was supposed to be clear skies? One by one, the crowd began to understand. Don't tell me. He changed the weather. With his punch. Katsuki growled as he forced himself to his feet. Stumbling and falling to his knees again, he glared hatefully at Deku, who still wasn't moving. Did he really change the weather with his punch? Like All Might. Such power. Damn it. Don't just stand there, Deku. Katsuki roared as he tried to get up again. Midnight then slowly approached Izuku, who was still standing there, no sign of movement or response or anything. The crowd had in turn become as silent as him, only the sound of rain piercing the silence. She idly flipped back her damp hair as she got closer to him. Midoriya? Nothing. Taking a closer look, she saw eyes, blank to the world, a serene smile on his face. Don't tell me. A quick check confirmed it. Izuku Midoriya is unconscious. Bakugo Katsuki wins, she declared with a whip of her crop. At first the stadium was silent. Then the cheers began. Unbelievable. Midoriya's literally standing unconscious, held up by his pure conviction to the end, fist raised high. It's a shock for the ages. Bakugo Katsuki wins the finals. Bakugo was frozen. He couldn't believe it. He refused to believe it. No, 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 no. He denied, his anger reaching its peak as he forced himself to stumble forward. Is this some kind of sick joke, Deku? I refuse to accept this as a victory. You should be lying at my feet like the pebble you are. Why won't you go down? Fall. Fall. He stumbled and fell back to his hands and knees, a mere few feet away from Deku. But he could do nothing, the rain having washed away all the sweat from his body. Why wouldn't he fall? Why wouldn't he stay down? Why did he always have to get in the way? Why do you always have to be so much better than me? Katsuki whispered, a plea that begged to be answered. He finally fell before Deku, the darkness embracing him. Izuku never replied. But if one looked closely, they would see how Izuku's hair slightly floated in the air, even while being drenched. However, nobody would ever see the woman who smiled as she held Izuku up in the air, somehow support his body with her own as she held his clenched fist high. Author. And that's a wrap. I know, shorter chapter than expected, but I felt that this would be a fitting place to stop the narrative. So, couple of quick questions. Do you all prefer me adding the brackets like that? I can do it to certain phrases, and if they have entire conversations in Mando A to indicate that I'll put dialogue instead of Mando A, at least to help understand the outsider's perspective. I hope that you all enjoyed the fights. Next chapter will get into the sports festival aftermath and the start of the internships. And that means, you guessed it, Stain. Oh, I have plans for that arc. I promise not to take a month and a half for the next chapter. It's been hectic lately. I've started the next third of my schooling for my job in the Navy, and it's barely leaving me with any time. I won't abandon this story, though. You can count on that. Reminder poll. Here's the question. Which of the Wanna girls do you think best relates to Ahsoka from the beginning of her appearance? This won't affect the story for a while, but it's for an idea I have. And now, some small omacs. Well, I guess they're story ideas. They're just too small for me to post in the manifold. 1. Senbon Zakura. Todoroki grimaced as he fended off the troublesome pink blades. They were extremely fast and dangerously sharp, cutting his ice waves into pieces before they could even reach Midoriya. I already warned you once, Todoroki. I shall not warn you again. Use your fire, or you will not be a hero, Izuku said. The boy's cold stare combined with his longer hair and Kensiken made for a chilling image, but Todoroki was nothing if not stubborn. I told you. I refuse to use his power. I'll become the #1 hero without ever using it, he boldly declared. Izuku closed his eyes in disappointment and sighed deeply. Very well then. If you will not do what is necessary to save the lives that you will have been entrusted to, then I shall crush you with everything I have and render you incapable of being a hero. The blades returned to their singular sword form, and Todoroki tensed at what Izuku would do next. You have left me no choice, Todoroki Shoto, he said as he turned his blade upside down. I will kill your career, here and now, before it's too late. He finished as he dropped the katana. He dropped his sword? The sword then seemed to melt in the ground.
Bankai.
And absolutely gigantic blades began to appear in rows behind him. Todoroki gasped, stepped backwards as their shadows fell over him. Scatter. Senbon Zakura Kageyoshi. Omake/Idea 2 Class 1B Izuku vs. Katsuki. Katsuki's Howister-fueled hand clashed harshly against Izuku's fist, forcing him backward. I get it now, Deku. Whatever power you pulled out of your ass is so worthless that you can't even use it right. It's pathetic. Just like you. The force pushed forward even more, and Izuku's arms spurted out blood. Raph. Itsuka gasped in horror. Her friend being brutalized like this was horrible to watch. When you think you're at your limit, remember. Izuku's eyes widened as he remembered Nana's words and Itsuka's. You are who you choose to be, but always remember where you came from. Izuku's foot planted into the ground, and he refused to move. It's not because I want to be a hero, Izuku started as his eyes began to glow. I have people who believe in me now, and I refuse to let them down. They finally stopped, just before the arena edge. You can resist all you want, Deku, but you'll never be anything more than a pebble on the road. Bakugo snarled. That's why I can't dash. Izuku's arm sparked.
What?
I refuse to lose, Izuku proclaimed as he let Bakugo's hand fly forward and struck him with his left fist. All Might watched worriedly. He's doing that switching thing again for more power. He used his right arm as bait. Katsuki grit his teeth in anger, sparks crackling along his arm as he prepared to return fire. What's wrong, Deku? That was weak. He gasped as he saw Izuku rear back his broken arm. That's because I didn't put my back into it that time. One for all surged through him as he remembered All Might's words. This power has gone from generation to generation, not only to fight against evil, but to save and inspire those who needed it, to save the hearts of the downtrodden and the smiles of the fearful. And now, it's your turn. Go, my boy. Izuku clenched his fist, pure power surging from it as Katsuki launched his biggest explosion yet. Izuku dodged. Coming out of the smoke with a smile, he pivoted forward with one last battle cry. Katsuki's eyes filled with fear as his fist came closer and he could do nothing. Goodbye, Bakugo. Crunch. His fist impacted brutally against his former friend's face. United States of. Spiking him into the ground, a small tornado of wind formed around the two of them. Smayawayawash. The dust settled, and the last words Katsuki heard before he finally fell unconscious were filled with remorse. Goodbye, Kachin. And Izuku was finally free. Author. And that's that. I actually had another idea for US of Smash. If you want to see it, along with any other of my older, crappier drawings, look up Draconis Ignites, with an E, on DeviantArt. That, or just look up Deku United States of Smash. Please review me any of your ideas, comments, concerns, etc. And thank you all for your love and support. Chapter 14, Aftermath. Legion, Aftermath. For everything you gain, you lose something else. And Bakugo starts with a huge explosion, but look at this. Midoriya powers on right through and knocks Bakugo out of the arena. He's out of breath and Midoriya almost crashes right on top of him. Cody held his hands together, his chin resting on top of them as he observed the two fight. He knew that VOD needed this more than ever, but he was worried. He could tell that the arrow eddy was getting under Izuku's skin. And Bakugo's just wailing on Midoriya. Will the champ be able to get out? He was becoming more savage, more brutal. And Midoriya dislocates Bakugo's arm. He's definitely not pulling any punches. Like that. However, it had its drawbacks. He could see Izuku coughing into his fist. He hoped that it was just coughing. Bakugo unleashes an enormous explosion. Midoriya is sent flying back towards the stage. He's getting back up. The two then met and began attacking each other in earnest, trading crushing blows. Midoriya's being absolutely brutal and Bakugo's managed to counter and throw him away. They're both shaky, but they're willing to go beyond. Izuku stumbled but stood tall. Cody blinked, confused. One moment, Izuku's expression was furious, borderline hateful. Now he was calm, serene, at peace. Cody? He heard Aizawa ask. Yeah, I see it too. I don't think it's something bad though. It looks like they're rearing up for their final attacks. It's time to end this festival with a momentous finish. Then the world turned white. The explosion was deafening, and the shockwave was devastating. Cody was so glad that Nizu had explained to him some of the precautions they'd installed each year after the injury complaints. Primarily, the security measures to prevent debris and other dangers from truly impacting the crowd. The wind was still there though. Apparently, Nizu found people being blown away funny. Cody didn't know why he expected anything different. It's the final attack of the ages. Midoriya and Bakugo went for one final blow, the smoke's clearing out of the arena. Who's still standing? Bakugo's body was the first to appear, still conscious and trying to get up. Izuku's body stood tall, fist raised high much to everyone's surprise. The crowd started to roar. Present Mike was jumping up and down in his spot, blown out of his mind. Midoriya's still standing. It's unbelievable. He's still standing. And look, Bakugo's still conscious too. Aching Tio get back up while Midoriya is still standing. VOD? Cody whispered as he leaned forward, trying to get a closer look. His head actually poked out of the announcer's box. He felt a single drop of water fall on his head. Drip, drop, plop. Then it started to rain. What in the world? Cody asked as he held his hand out to the sky, seeing the new clouds that definitely weren't there before. It's raining? But today was supposed to be clear skies? Mike muttered, his voice carrying over the stadium. Murmurs rose through the crowd as they began to realize that the weather had changed. Many who lived in Mustafesu and had been at the sludge incident in person remembered the last time that had happened and who had caused it. Don't tell me. He changed the weather. With his punch. More comments rose, and while Bakugo yelled incoherently from below, Midnight tentatively approached Izuku's still body. Izuku Midoriya is unconscious. Bakugo Katsuki wins. A few seconds of silence, before the crowd absolutely lost it. Cody sat back in his chair, leaning a bit back as he sighed. Unbelievable, Midoriya's literally standing unconscious, held up by his pure conviction to the end, fist raised high. It's a shock for the ages. Bakugo Katsuki wins the finals. Cody watched as Bakugo started to yell, infuriated even, making it only a few feet before falling in front of Izuku and finally falling unconscious himself. Ah, a symbolic victory then. VOD may have lost the actual fight, but anybody can see where the victory truly lies. As the crowd continued to cheer, Cody watched as Bakugo was taken away on a stretcher by a pair of robots, while a pair of clones gently set Izuku on his own and took him away. He hoped, however, that whatever change Izuku had gone through during the fight, it would be for the better. Another break was being taken by the crowd as they prepared everything for the awards ceremony. The students of 1A were excitedly talking about the fight they just witnessed and were waiting on the main stage, the concrete already removed. Ochako was slightly worried, however. She'd seen how angry Izuku had been, although for some reason his demeanor had changed during the middle of the fight. She was worried for Tenya too. His sudden departure had been frantic. Ochako, I'm sorry, but I have to go. My brother's been attacked by a villain. I'm so sorry. Is there anything we can do? No, don't let Izuku know yet. Let him enjoy the end of the festival. I'll speak with him later. Okay. She hoped that his brother was all right. Hey look, they're bringing them up. All of the first-year events have been finished for this year's sports festival. It's time for the awards ceremony. Fireworks exploded in the air as the crowd began to applaud the victors, and a large smoke screen spawned behind Midnight as pillars began to rise. Various students gave out groans and other noises of disbelief as they saw Bakugo chained up and muzzled, thrashing wildly. You've got to be kidding me. Apparently he's been like that since he woke up. Turns out the clones were the ones who strapped him in. Wow, those clones really do have it against him. One pillar was empty, however. Unfortunately, Midoriya Izuku suffered extreme injuries and exhaustion and is currently under Recovery Girl's care. Everybody, please give him a round of applause for his hard work. He definitely deserved that silver medal. Midnight announced, the crowd applauding, whistling, and in general cheering for their fan favorite. The disappointment was there, however. Shame that Izuku couldn't be here. His fights were crazy. Kamakiri waved from his third-place pillar, while Todoroki stood there in silent contemplation. And presenting the medals dash. Ha 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 ha. Our very own All Might. I am here with the medals. A pause as he then turned to her slightly indignant. I talked over you. The crowd still cheered for their number one hero, many of them commenting on how lucky the first years were. If you could present the medals? Starting from first place. A sheepish Midnight said as she handed them to him. All Might merely nodded before heading to Kamakiri. Said boy was extremely giddy, which was honestly a bit amusing to see. He tended to have a more robust exterior during classes, yet it seemed like his time in 1B was doing him well. Young Kamakiri, you've certainly done your class proud. You've proven your great tenacity, and we're so close to making it to the finals themselves. You've done good work, young man. I hope to see great things from you in the future. Remember to always pay attention to your surroundings, and that sometimes you need to think outside the box, he said while hugging him. You bet, All Might. Moving on to Todoroki, he addressed as he put on his medal. Young Todoroki, I assume there is a reason you've started using your fire? Let's just say that I see now what you see in Midoriya. I wanted to become a hero like you. All Might, he just showed me that there's a lot more to being a hero than just being number one. I still have some things to settle. Todoroki finished as he looked at the taller man with a calmness that wasn't there before. It is a hard lesson for many to learn, that sometimes we can't do things alone. But I feel that you've taken the first steps. Just remember, it's also important for you to be a hero not just for others, but for yourself. I wish you well for your future. All Might replied as he hugged the boy. Thank you, All Might. Heading off to the last, he was admittedly a bit put off by the restraints. Honestly, was the muzzle really necessary? Ah, young Bakugo, congratulations on your dash. He was cut off as Bakugo growled. All Might, this victory means nothing. It was cheap. Even if the world acknowledges it, I refuse to. I refuse to accept a victory where Dekka's not at my feet. Sheesh, this kid really needs to chill out. Ah, I understand. In a world where there are people constantly being compared publicly, there aren't many who keep aiming for the top of an unchanging scale. It seems like you're one of them. All Might said while Bakugo continued to growl. Look at that face, certainly ferocious. Still, Bakugo's vitriol for Izuku did seem very unwarranted, although that involved a history that he hadn't really asked about. Even Django didn't really talk about their relationship with the blonde boy, but they did have some history. Still, he had to be fair, and although he wished Izuku was up here, he was glad that his successor had made his mark. Lifting the medal, All Might continued. Take this medal. Think of it as a wound. That way you can remember and become better. I said I don't want it. Trying to force it over the boy's head, who stubbornly refused and moved his head, All Might was finally able to force the lanyard into the boy's jaw. Turning to the crowd, All Might gestured toward the camera as he continued his speech. Well, they were the winners this time. But listen up, everyone. Any one of these fine young men and women could have made it onto these podiums. The students and those from beyond the screen paid rapt attention to All Might's words as he continued his speech. Up in the announcer's box, Hizashi made a gesture that made both Aizawa and Cody slap the back of his head. As you all saw, pushing each other, competing with and against each other, striving beyond your limits and going beyond. That's what it means to be a hero. And as far as I see it, the next generation of heroes has a lot to offer. Pointing his finger to the sky, he readied to rally the crowd. Now, there's just one last thing to say. Everybody say it with me. He took a deep breath. Hold it. All Might coughed in surprise as the crowd turned towards the field. Many students gasping in surprise and parting as Izuku hobbled through the crowd, his friends gleefully surrounding him. Why young Midoriya? Izuku smiled softly at his master, the crowd already cheering at seeing him on his feet. All Might, I think I made a promise that I'd make it to the end of this festival, right? Show the world that I'm here. All Might paused in surprise, but smiled even brighter. That you did, young Midoriya. Izuku hobbled forward, standing tall even though his right arm was in a cast and a sling, and his left was almost completely wrapped up. Other bandages on his body limited his movement, and he was most definitely in pain. Yet he still smiled. Can you guys help me up? He asked his friends. Ochako swiftly removed his gravity, and Yuga helped steady him up the pillar where All Might set him down after Ochako released him. Young Midoriya, you have no idea how proud I am of you, my boy. You may not have won the festival, but I can certainly tell you that you've won the hearts and minds of the people, inspiring your friends, and if I'm not mistaken, releasing your anger. He gently said while resting his hands on Izuku's shoulder, being careful not to hurt him after placing his medal on his neck. Izuku nodded, a small, gentle smile adorning his face. Let's just say I had some help. I'm proud of you, Ad.
Son.
Thank you, Beer. Izuku grimaced before turning to All Might. I can't move much. Can you help me raise my fist? Izuku asked. All Might paused, his eyebrows slightly raised in surprise, but he nodded and gently took Izuku's wrist. One last plus ultra? All Might. Heh, yes, I suppose that would be appropriate, he said with a chuckle before turning to the crowd. Everybody together now. 1, 2 dash. As one they all roared, Izuku's fist rising with All Might's.
Plus ultra.
The crowds were slowly making their way out of the stadium, clones helping guide the families along. Already there'd been a few near incidents with some lost children, but they were fortunately quickly reunited with their parents. Izuku had returned to the medic room, utterly exhausted. He defied Recovery Girl's orders of rest to head out to the awards ceremony. His eyes growing heavy, he soon fell asleep. Good job, 9. Meanwhile, the students were back in their classroom, just about ready to be dismissed for the day. Good job, all of you. There won't be any school tomorrow or the day after. I'm sure that plenty of pros will want to recruit you, but we'll consolidate everything and announce it when you get back. Rest up and be ready. Yes, sir. As they all got up and went home, Izuku's friends gathered around as Ochako related to them why Tenya was gone. All of them were worried for their friend and could only hope that his family was fine. It seemed that a lot of things were changing. Hosu General Hospital. Tenya quickly bowed to the receptionist before speeding down the halls, disregarding the receptionist calling after him. Mother! He yelled as he found her by the door. Tenya! She exclaimed as she rose to meet him. How is Tensei doing? He asked before she motioned to a door. Practically bursting it open, he quickly called out for his brother, his mother trying to calm him down and remind him about keeping a mask. He shuddered in shock as he stared at his hospitalized brother. The doctor quickly rose and delivered the news as simply as possible, warning them that he was still hazy since the anesthetic had only recently worn off. How close of a call it had been. Tensei wearily opened his eyes upon hearing them. Tenya, mother. Their mother couldn't even stand anymore, falling to her knees. Tenya shakily walked over to his brother's bedside. Tensei, it's gonna be all right. Even though, such an accomplished younger brother, like you looks up to me. Tenya couldn't believe it. This couldn't be happening. I'm sorry, Tenya. Your big brother, lost. Tenya choked as he fell to his knees. Tensei. Elsewhere, a dark figure walked through alleyways. His crusade would continue as he cut down one false hero after another. He'd recently succeeded against Ingenium, but there was still more work to be done. Still, he could feel it. A change in the air, and whispers among the common people. A new hero student, someone that was making waves, and he wasn't even out of school. Someone that even All Might was rumored to favor. Stain would have to look deeper into this, to see if the child was worthy of the title of hero, or if he would have to be culled before his roots could grow deep. Who knows? Perhaps the child may prove himself fruitful, and could even be worthy of killing him. The next day, it was a beautiful day, and Todoroki Shoto was preparing to do something long overdue. Shoto, where are you going? His sister asked as he headed out the door. The hospital. What? All of a sudden? Why? Wait. She yelled as she got closer. Is it okay to not tell Dad? Yeah. Why do you want to see Mom now? After all this time? Because I need to. I'll be back, he replied as he shut the door. Walking down the road, even passing by a mother and her child, Todoroki was left to his memories. Mom, I'm going crazy. I can't take it anymore. Every day, the children seemed to be more and more like him. With each step, he became closer to facing her. Shoto's, that child's left side sometimes looks very unsightly to me. I can't raise him anymore. I feel like I shouldn't. Soon enough, he found himself in front of the hospital. For so long, he'd thought that his mere presence would hurt her, which is why he'd stayed away. I wonder, is she still shackled by me and the old man? Either way, if he wanted to become a hero, a true hero, one that would give his all, I want to bring you hope, Todoroki. But you have to take the first step. Midoriya. He reached for the handle, but let his hand fall. It's okay for you to become who you want to be. To be the hero I want to be, I need to see her. He thought as he opened up the door. There's so much I have to tell her, so much we have to talk about. She was facing away from him, her white hair cascading over her shoulders as she gazed out to the garden outside her window.
Mom.
She perked up. The voice was both familiar yet unfamiliar, and slowly she turned, not believing her eyes. She was beautiful, even if she doesn't want it. I will rescue her from here. He took the first step forward. This is where I start. Where I have to. Izuku smiled as he looked at the photo that Ochako had sent of her with her parents in the group chat. Apparently, they'd surprised her. I'm glad that you've made such good friends, my boy, Toshinori said. He'd been invited by the Midoriya family for a brief lunch. Me too. My clones have also been making friends. Apparently, Heavy and Echo are having lunch with the Azuis. 2010 and Cut Up had breakfast with Kamiri Wood's new team, and Pons has been hanging around Aizawa-sensei and Yamada-sensei. Wow, have any other of the VOD made friends? Well, Fordo's been hanging around Hound Dog. He was the sniper that killed that one villain back at the USJ. Both Toshinori and Inko tensed slightly at the mention of that place, but were pleasantly surprised at how quickly Izuku mentioned it and moved on. Apparently Blai's been trailing behind Midnight Sensei. Not too sure what to think about that, honestly. But Cody said that it's mostly her teasing him a lot while he ignores her. Pons says that both Aizawa and Yamada find it hilarious cause she gets frustrated. Izuku munched on some eggs and swallowed them before grabbing some juice and drinking it down. Izuku? He perked up as he saw his beery parents, looking at him in concern. Are you all right? During the sports festival, you were so angry. We were worried about you. Inko started before Toshinori took over. And then during your fight with young Bakugo, you suddenly changed. You seemed at peace. Right, I almost forgot. Izuku softly said as he laid down his utensils. Beer. I met her. I met Nana. Toshinori dropped his utensils, utterly gobsmacked. What? For that one moment, I fell inside One for All, and she was there. She comforted me and helped me grieve and process everything. Gave a lot of good advice. Told me to smile. After all, the strongest dash are those who always smile. Toshinori finished, tears falling as he remembered her. She had a few words for you, you know? Yeah.
Toshinori ni kartaugal saade.
I know your name is my child. Toshinori's jaw trembled as he clenched the table, his frame trembling as he heard words that he'd longed to hear for years. Inko gently held him, and Izuku also hugged him as Toshinori broke down. Master Beer. Toshinori muttered under his breath. After a few minutes, Toshinori was calm enough to continue his light meal. Beer, I want you to go into the Bacta tank. I spoke with RG about it, and she wants to give it a try too. I know that it won't bring back One for All to full strength for you, but hopefully, you can at least gain back some of your health. Toshinori paused at Izuku's words and considered them. Nodding thoughtfully, he took a deep, slightly painful breath before replying. If you'd think it would help, I'll agree to it, Izuku. Inko smiled at the two of them as they finished up their meal. Once finished, Izuku invited Toshinori to come up to his room. Izuku. Inko breathed out, slightly worried. Are you sure? Izuku nodded. It's time I face it. The three walked in together, and All Might looked in bittersweet wonder. There was a bunk bed and 2 desks, both filled to the brim with hero memorabilia, papers, and other knickknacks. Posters of himself and various other heroes decorated the walls. A light coat of dust decorated everything, but oddly enough the room felt peaceful as the sun's light pierced through the blinds. Toshinori uttered a small prayer under his breath, a pardon for the intrusion. I don't think I'll be sleeping back in here anytime soon, but I want to at least spend some time here, to remember the good times, Izuku said while idly passing his hand on top of a desk. He wiped away the dust from his fingers before putting it back on it, bowing his head as he felt tears softly trail down. And I wanted to do something special, he said as he grabbed a box that was in the corner of the desk. Django had a fascination for collecting random things that he would find from anywhere. Opening the box, Izuku showed Tashinori the bunch of little objects inside, the majority of which were actually crystals and crazy-looking rocks. Izuku plucked 2 out from the box and showed them to Tashinori. These were his favorite. I'm planning on keeping this one on me, as a closer reminder of him, he said regarding the black crystal. It was certainly beautiful in a haunting sort of way as the light seemed to be sucked into it. I'd like for you to keep this one, Izuku said as he held out the other. Tashinori gasped in surprise as he saw the crystal. It was a beautiful clear blue that almost seemed to radiate light as if it was the exact opposite of its dark counterpart. Django said he collected this one cause it reminded him of your eyes and how they always seemed to glow with strength even when you were physically weak. Tashinori reverently took the crystal into his own hand. Are you sure? I'd love nothing more than for the both of us to have something to have him beside us. Tashinori clenched his fist and nodded solemnly before pocketing the crystal. He'd need to make something special to hold it later. Come, there's one last thing I want to show you. Walking out of the room, Izuku flicked the lights off and started to close the door. Peering inside, he paused slightly as he saw the light from the blinds land in the center of the room, just in front of Django's desk. Smiling softly, he closed the door. Reuniting with his mother, the three then stood before Django's altar. We've taken to a new tradition, one that we'd like you to join in. After all, you're part of our family now. Tashinori raised his brow in surprise but nodded, pleased to be included. They all kneeled and Izuku began to teach. It goes like this, in I sukwai, gar kwai erratic, in I pertali, gar darajuum. What does it mean? I am still alive, but you are dead. I remember you, so you are eternal. Izuku softly uttered the translation and began helping Tashinori through the pronunciation. Once you're done, you mention the names that you want to remember. I sukwai, gar kwai erratic, in I pertali, gar darajuum, Django, Nviode. My brothers. Izuku began with a small bow of his head. Inko was next.
Ni sukuyi, garka y erreadik, ni partailos, gardarasum, yango, neade.
My sons. Tashinori took a shaky breath before doing the best he could.
Ni sukuyi, garka y erreadik, ni partailos, gardarasum, yango, bode.
He took in a deep breath before uttering the last name.
Nona, nirbuir.
Within the next few days, before school started, Izuku decided that he had a few more people he needed to speak to. A few days later, thanks to All Might, he'd met up with Principal Nizu and was playing a game with him. So what is the occasion, young Midoriya? I know I said this before, but I wanted to thank you for everything you did for me and the VOD. Your words put a lot of trust into them by the people. But words can only do so much. It was their actions that cemented their reputation. That may be true, but you helped start us off. I only wish I could have done more. Perhaps then would your brother still be with us. Nizu said with some sorrow. Unfortunately, the past can't be changed, but that doesn't mean that Django isn't still with us. What we do with his sacrifice is his legacy. Wise words, young Midoriya. I'm glad to see how much you've grown. Painful growth it was, but growth nonetheless. I actually have something for you, Principal Nizu, Izuku said as he presented a crystal from Django's collection for him. The rodent reached out his paw and gently secured it. It was a beautiful green and seemed to slightly hum. Django had a collection of his most prized possessions. I think it fitting that you have your own piece to remember him by, Izuku said as he held out the necklace that held his own. Nizu gratefully nodded before they continued their game. Izuku ended up losing as always, but it was much closer than before. Later, after finishing up with Nizu, Izuku headed out and found Snipe. Snipe-sensei. How can I help ya, partner? I wanted to thank you for helping the VOD and I out so much. Your training has helped prevent a lot of accidents and made us much more prepared. I know that you and Django worked on his pistols. I actually have one with me, Izuku said before pulling the second one out. I think the second should rightfully go to you. Snipe paused, shocked at the gesture. Midoriya, are you sure? Trust me, I'm sure. This is what Django would want. Snipe nodded slowly as he grabbed the pistol reverently. Grabbing one of his own, he unloaded it and stored it, before placing Django's pistol in the holster. Thank you, partner. Thank you, Snipe-sensei. Rain was pouring down liberally throughout the city, and Izuku was currently taking the train while scrolling through social media on his phone. He was admittedly very surprised by the positive feedback he'd been seeing about both him and the VOD. So get this, I'm here at the hashtag UA Sports Festival, and my sister's running around the place. She gets lost, and I'm losing my mind. I let one of those clones know, and not even 5 minutes later she's back in my arms. So thankful.
Vode.
Those clones cheering for their bro was really inspiring. Seeing the Kyokas in action got my blood boiling. Hashtag UA Sports Festival hashtag vote. Video. Vote War Champ bruh, I got chills. Slamming their armor like that? It's like that Maori thing.
Vode.
His actions during the festival had especially gotten attention from the people. Izuku felt giddy. He was trending. Video. Students help Midoriya Izuku bruh. How inspiring you gotta be for your classmates to help you win. Hashtag Midoriya Izuku. GIF. Flintstone's tank. This dude really be pushing a whole ass tank. GIF. Scary lady. This girl should not be having this much fun firing that thing. His fights were what attracted the most attention. Image. Midoriya versus Shinso. My man really Oklahoma smashed this dude. Hashtag Midoriya Izuku. Hashtag UA Sports Festival. Image. Midoriya versus Monoma. Beat this guy's ass too. Of course, there were some detractors. Some especially criticized his perceived harshness against Todoroki when he pulled out the gun. Was it really necessary? I mean, what is UA thinking? Letting him do that? Reply. Sometimes you gotta play the villain to be the hero. From what I heard, that's the first time the Todoroki kid actually used his fire. Reply. Kid must have been pissed. I'd be too. I do martial arts and I'd hate to fight an opponent that wouldn't give his all. Reply. Still delivered a grade A ass whoopin'. That Todoroki pulled off a super explosion and still lost. Shame. I expected more out of Endeavor's kid.
109 Ripley.
Well, he was gonna move on from that reply chain. His last fight was what really sold him. Dude, how baller do you have to be to stay standing while unconscious? Hashtag Midoriya Izuku. Image. Final Fist, dude made it rain. I was there a few months ago when All Might did the same. Reply. Speaking about All Might, when he helped the kid raise his fist? Chills, bro. Reply. Image. All Might helps Midoriya. You think they know each other? Like, actually know each other? Kid was looking pretty happy and so was he. Reply. It's All Might. Of course the kid's gonna be starstruck, and he's always smiling. Reply. Kid literally said, I am here. Think he's planning on taking All Might's place?
1154 Ripley.
Izuku was knocked out of his musings as he heard the whispers from around him. A man grabbed his attention, and he turned to see multiple people congratulating him. A few even asking for his autograph, and even a few pictures with some kids and teens. As he got off of his stop, he smiled and waved back as they cheered for him. Do your best, hero. I will. Taking solace in the rain as he calmly walked up towards UA, he was surprised to see Tenya running up behind him. Good morning, Izuku. Tenya? Why are you walking so slow? You're going to be late. Late? There's still 5 minutes till the first bell. UA students should always be 10 minutes early. He yelled before speeding off. Izuku could only blink in surprise. Later, as they were putting their things away in their lockers, Izuku tried to get Tenya's attention. Tenya dash. If it's about my brother, there's no need to worry. He began before turning to face his friend. I'm sorry for worrying you needlessly. Walking away, Izuku could only stare at Tenya's back while he continued to worry. He recognized the anger in those eyes. It was the same as his own. Entering the class and greeting the rest of his friends, he was glad to hear them also excited. It was great to hear them talk about their own experiences this morning from all their well-wishers. As Aizawa came in and greeted them, the class quickly went to their seats and greeted him back. Tsuyu was the first to notice something different about him. Aizawa-sensei, your casts are gone.
I'm glad.
It was true, despite a few scars. Aizawa was back to full health. Old lady went overboard with her treatments. More importantly, We have a special hero informatics class today. The atmosphere became tense as they wondered what exactly this class would entail. Code names, Aizawa simply said. You'll be coming up with hero names. We're gonna do something exciting. Aizawa quickly flared his eyes, and the class quieted. This is related to the drafts that I mentioned the other day. Usually, these start when you're second and third years, since you'd have more experience and would be immediate assets to the heroes. For them to extend offers to first years like you shows that they're very interested in your potential, but they can die off if they lose interest by graduation. Adults are so selfish, Mineta muttered as he smacked his desk. So we'll have to prove ourselves, right? Hagakure called out from the side. That's right. And here are the totals for those offers. Midoriya, 7,503. Todoroki, 4,123. Bakugo, 3,556. Ida, 354. Uraraka, 284. Yaoyorozu, 203. Shuji, 103. Jiru, 56. Ishido, 31. Aoyama, 20. Kuda, 17. As you can see, a lot of focus was on those three, as well as those that made it to the finals, plus a few that made it an impact, he said as he raised a brow towards Izuku, who slightly flushed as he saw the names on the board. Many of them made comments about the disparity, although they were most surprised about the difference between Todoroki and Bakugo, whose positions had been switched from their placements at the festival. Guess some people are too scared to ask for a guy who had to be restrained on the podium. What are the pros scared of? You're amazing, Todoroki, Yaoyorozu said to her neighbor. Most of them are probably because of my old man. Ochako was excitedly shaking Tenya back and forth, surprised at the number of offers that she received. Yes. Izuku was still stunned by the number of offers that he'd received. Sure, he knew that the VOD and he had made an impact, but this much? I wish you could see this, Django, Izuku whispered fondly as he looked at the numbers. From inside him, he could feel the VOD cheering him on, and even the faintest hints of Nana's approval. It was fulfilling. Keeping these results in mind, Aizawa continued. Whether or not anyone asked for you, you will all be participating in internships with pros. Internships? Izuku asked. Yeah. At the USJ, you already got to experience combat with real villains? The atmosphere grew tense at the mention of that place, and Izuku could only look on solemnly. But it will still be meaningful training for you to see pros at work firsthand. So that explains the hero names. Sato grinned as he clenched his fist. It's starting to get a lot more fun. Ochako replied with a blinding smile. Well, those hero names are temporary, but if you're not serious about it, there'll be hell to pay later. A lot of the guys became very excited as Midnight walked in. Because a lot of hero names used by students become recognized by society, and they end up becoming professional hero names. Midnight. Well, that's how it is. So Midnight will be making sure your names are okay. I can't do stuff like that, Aizawa said while picking up his sleeping bag, somewhat fondly remembering how he got his own name. When you give yourself a name, you get a more concrete image of what you want to be like in the future, and you can get closer to it. Like the old saying, names and natures do often agree. As he got into his sleeping bag, Aizawa left them with one final comment. Like All Might. As Izuku received his board and passed the stack down, he pondered over what that meant. When he was younger, he'd come up with a bunch of childish names that involved All Might in one way or another. Then Django arrived and he'd helped Izuku gain a different perspective on things, especially on what it meant to be a hero, what it meant to be like All Might. Even after receiving One for All, Django had been quick to offer his own perspective. Just because you have the quirk doesn't mean you need to become him. You can be your own hero too, you know? Just remember, you never have to stand alone. We'll always have your back, whatever you decide. Even Toshinori had his own advice to give once he'd learned more about what happened during the festival. A symbol of hope? Huh? Certainly has a ring to it to be sure, and backed up by your friends, I'm sure there's nothing you can't do. You aren't disappointed? That I'm not looking to become a symbol of peace like you? Of course not. If anything, I'm glad that you're doing things differently than me. Our circumstances are different, Izuku. Those concepts and our missions as well. I admit that although I would not trade my career and accomplishments for anything, I do wish that I'd had more support along the way, both from my friends and the heroes around me. Do you mean Dash? One for all is your quirk now, Izuku. Should the day come that you trust them with the full truth, it will be your decision. Thank you, Beer. Think nothing of it, my boy. Truth is, I'm glad. With this new generation, you will be able to do something truly special. What matters most, however, is that you become the hero that you want to become while remembering who you are and where you came from. Izuku paused as he recalled Toshinori's words and remembered all the times with Django, the VOD, his friends, and family, the dark years before he'd gotten to know his brother, and the brightness of the most recent weeks. I've got an idea, Izuku. I've been working on it in Mandoe for you. He knew what he'd be called. He'd known for years. Although he'd have to change the title, the Legion hero might have been cool, but he wanted to represent his future goal as well. All right, time to present those names. Who's ready? We're presenting? Uh-oh. Yuga turned out to be the first to present his name. Here I go, shining hero. Now you are. Izuku immediately choked on his spit. Yuga? You like Monami? I was inspired by you and Fordo. In fact, now you are means to illuminate. Fitting for me, non? Izuku could only chuckle as he grinned brightly, already feeling the deep surge of approval from the VOD still inside him. Does Fordo know this? Not yet. I have a surprise for him, Yuga replied with his usual flair. All right then. Ishido's Alien Queen was unfortunately rejected due to copyright problems and the intimidating nature behind it. Many in the class were worried about what to do for their names, now unsure as to the criteria, but Tsuyu was able to save the day by showing her name, Froppy. Sturdy hero, Red Riot. Ooh, paying homage to the chivalrous hero. Crimson Riot, huh? Yep, he's old-fashioned, but that's the hero image I'm going for. Midnight softly smiled at the boy. If you're bearing a name that you admire, then it'll come with that much more pressure. I'm ready. Izuku looked to the side to where Kaminari was debating about his own name, only for Kyoka to jokingly call him Jaminge. Kaminari originally thought it as a reference to one of his favorite authors, only for Kyoka to say that it was a reference to his tendency to short himself out. Stop messing with me. Hearing hero, Beslar, Izuku started to flush as he wondered whether all his friends were going to put Mandoe into their names. Ooh, exotic. What does it mean? It means music, simple, but it's one of my passions too. I love it. As his classmates called out their names, Bakugo's was surprisingly rejected, and Ochako took up the next spot. I came up with this, Jate Kara Hero, Uravity. Izuku flushed deeply as he tried to work out a response. Where did you guys find these? Well, Django started teaching me a lot about Mandoe, and since I like space, he helped me learn a lot of terms. This means lucky or good stars. I wanted it to be something involving gravity, but that'd be a bit too on the nose, I think. That's so sweet. I love it. Izuku kept silent, as he also remembered the other meaning of that phrase. It also meant destiny or luck, but it was also used to reference how the stars were good to follow. In other words, a good course to steer by. A hero that led a good course. He found it fitting for his first friend. You know, this is actually going a lot smoother than I thought it would. All that's left is Bagwo, who needs to rethink his, Ida, and Midoriya. Tenya had kept to himself throughout the class, unwilling to write the words his brother had asked him to. Tenya, I wasn't sure if I should have said something yesterday, but I can't feel my legs. What? No way. Ingenium will end here.
No.
You still have so many to lead. So many to save. I don't like this. I can't accept this. Me either, which is why if you're up to it. Tenya's marker slowly reached for the board. Will you take up the name Ingenium for me? He only managed to write the first few characters before shuddering and stopping. Tenya. Oh, you're just going by your first name, like Todoroki then? Izuku looked at Tenya in worry. He knew that he needed to speak with him as soon as possible. Midoriya, you're up? Midnight called as he went up to the podium. This is something that has deep meaning to me. Django was the one who came up with it. A small moment of silence as they remembered their fallen friend. I want to become a hero that inspires hope to the people while ensuring that I stay true to my roots and to the VOD. Flipping the sign, he smiled brightly as he stated his name. Rising symbol of hope, Mandalore. Staff room. Oh, looks like a last-minute offer came in for Midoriya, Cementos mentioned with All Might behind him. Oh, really? Toshinori asked as he got closer. I wonder who Dash. Toshinori gaped in shock as fear ran through his entire body. It can't be. Lord Explosion Murder. You completely missed the point, rejected. Izuku burst out laughing and Bakugo started to scream at him. Once Aizawa woke up, glad to see that hero names had been decided, he returned to the topic of internships. These internships will be for a week, and as to where they'll be done, for those of you that got offers, you'll be given the time to look over them and select one. The rest of you will choose from this list of 40 agencies that UA's partnered with around the country. Remember, regardless of offers, each hero and hero agency has its own procedure, specialty, and manner of operation, so choose wisely. Aizawa advised them. For example, our very own number 13 is a rescue-based hero, so she'd be focusing on what to do during accidents and disasters, such as first aid and victim relief, rather than fighting villains. The students started to consider their options as Aizawa finished by saying that their choices should be turned in before the weekend. We only got 2 days. Choose wisely. Dismissed. Lunchtime. So, have you guys made your choices yet? Not yet. Nope. Still pickin'. I'm going to MT Lady. Mineta said with a thumbs up to himself. You're thinking something perverted, aren't you, Mineta? Tsuyu said as she walked past him. Oh, of course not. Ochako then turned towards Ishido. What about you, Ishido? Did you choose somebody? You did get 31 offers. That's the point. There's so many. How can I possibly choose? Ishido cried out while pulling her hair in slight frustration. Well, at least it's only 31. Look at Midoriya, Ojiro said while pointing to the said boy. Izuku had currently grouped together some desks and actually had some of his clones with him as he looked through the stack. Hey, Cody, Pons, Fordo. Ochako greeted as they walked a bit closer. Said 3 clones looked at each other in surprise. How did she recognize us? How did she recognize them? How'd you do that? They're all wearing the same armor and everything, literally. Ishido asked in confusion. Well, it's kinda easy. Look at their chests. They all looked at the clones and chests, which had symbols on them. Fordo actually walked me through some of the organization of the VOD. Cody's the martial commander, which means that he's in direct control of the VOD after Izuku. Pons and Fordo are regular commanders, meaning that they fall right below him in the chain of command. You can tell by the amount of dots on their chest plates. Ochako pointed out, and funnily enough, there it was. 8 dots on Cody's chest, and 6 on the other 2. They're currently the only 2 with that high of a rank outside of the Mindscape, but there are more inside. Correct. Nice to see you remember, Fordo said with a smile. The 3 clones then looked at Izuku, who flushed and glared at them. The interaction was not lost on Ishido, who started grinning. Wow, you guys are taking this seriously, huh? Of course, whatever hero that VOD picks will have a direct impact in shaping his career, Cody replied as he looked through his own stack. Already they'd had a set of piles, some rejected due to distance or specialty, others that were simply too small and were obvious ploys of gaining attention from the public. The clones had been paying attention to social media, and Nizu had warned them about some of the more selfish offers that could be found. Fordo was going over a potential list, while Pons managed the research on the definite picks. Actually, I already picked one, Ochako said with a cheer. Really? Where? Battle Hero, Gunhead's agency. Is that so? Pons asked as he looked up from his research. Nizu had lent him a tablet. We thought that you wanted to be a rescue hero. Gunhead prioritizes in villain attacks. Yep, I got an offer from them and it left me thinking, I want to be a rescue hero, but after I had to stop during the festival, it made me realize that I also need to work on my stamina and fighting capabilities too. Don't want to get left behind, right? You totally want to use the rocket launcher again, don't you? Fordo deadpanned. Ochako slightly slouched and nodded. That thing was really cool. I want to be a hero that can rescue people and kick villain butt, she replied with a smile. Too bright. The four at the table thought to themselves. Even the VOD inside Izuku were shying away. In the end, I want to expand my perspective and abilities. That's great to hear, Izuku replied while looking over his stack. Wait a minute, Izuku, are you trembling? Oh yeah. Air chairs? Air chair exercise? Have you been doing that all class? Damn it, VOD. RG told you to rest. It's an easy-to-do exercise, it's fine. He has a point. The isometric dash, Ojiro tried to interject but was cut off as Cody interrupted him. It's not fine dash, the four brothers devolved into arguing, with the three clones pushing down on Izuku's body much to his protest. Bakugo just seethed, wanting them to shut up. What a mad banquet of darkness. Tokoyami muttered to the side. Next to them, however, Tenya sat alone at his desk, having made his decision and written it down. Want to go home together, Izuku? Ochako brightly asked as they prepared to leave for the day. Sure thing, Ochako. Izuku slightly squeaked out before clearing his throat. Ochako nodded and turned to the door. Turning to his grinning brothers, who were making silly gestures, he motioned for them to knock it off before turning just in time as Ochako turned back around. Let's go, Dash. I am here in a bizarre position. Izuku blinked at him. You know, it's the little things like this that give some credence to what Django used to say. Bleg. Izuku. Ochako lightly smacked him as the clones began to chuckle. Young Midoriya, I have no idea what you're talking about. All Might stuttered. Relax, Sensei. She already knows about how we knew each other before the year began. Not everything, mind you, but I did promise to tell her some stories. Yeah, All Might, it's so cool. Ehem, I see. Well, could you come with me for a moment?
No jokes.
All Might pointed a finger at the four of them, who jokingly stood at attention. Sure thing. Just down the hall near the restrooms, All Might got straight to the point. You've gotten another offer from a hero. Another? Is there anything special in particular about this hero? Why yes, his name is Gran Torino. He was a teacher here at UA for only a year and served as my homeroom teacher. He also knows about One for All. In fact, he probably asked for you because of that. All Might began as Izuku started to feel a sudden sense of familiarity, fondness, and regret mixed with something else. Nana? Cool. Another person that knows about One for All. Who all does know about it? Gran Torino was the sworn friend of my predecessor. He retired a long time ago, so I forgot to mention him. But included with the principal, recovery girl, and your mother, Sir Night-Eye is the only other that knows about our shared secret, although he and I don't speak much nowadays. Izuku nodded, feeling that there was something deeper within that, but didn't want to pry. Then All Might started to shiver as he recalled Gran Torino. Was it because I wrote of you when I sent him that letter? Could he not stand by and watch my inadequate teaching? He even used his old name. It's scary, too scary. Stop trembling, legs. All Might growled out as he smacked his legs. Who is this guy to leave All Might shaking like that? Izuku was suddenly very wary. Anyway, it is my duty to train you. I know you have plenty of offers, but I know that he would be able to give you the training needed for One for All. All Might managed to get out even with his shaking as he held out the paper. Izuku shakily took it, dreading the choice in front of him. However, if this man knows about One for All, then it would be best to learn from him. Internships, huh? Aizawa heard Snipe mention as he held up the stack of papers from his students. Next to him, Pons and Cody were playing shogi, a game that Nizu had originally introduced Django and Izuku to a while ago, and in turn, he'd apparently started teaching the commanders. It was quickly becoming a popular game among the clones that had been selected as officers, although none had come close to Nizu. In fact, only Izuku and Django working together had managed to bring Nizu to a tie, and even then that game had taken hours. It still gave Aizawa the shivers. It was still a bit weird, having what could be considered as students inside the staff rooms. But the VOD were doing well, and Nizu was even providing some education of their own for them. How he did it, Aizawa didn't have a clue, and he honestly didn't want to ask. Yeah, a few have already decided. It's an important event. Make sure they think about it properly. There are some third years that still have regrets about it. Snipe finished before heading off. Yeah, Aizawa nonchalantly replied as he looked through them before stopping at Ida's. Normal hero. Manual? From Hosu? He surely had better offers. Don't tell me. Wait, so you got an offer from All Might's teacher? Ochako exclaimed as she and Izuku were getting ready to head home. Izuku peered into Tenya's locker, only to find it with his running shoes. He already left, didn't he? Yeah, Izuku said as he closed the locker. Izuku recalled the news how Ingenium had been attacked by the hero killer, Stain, a man who'd already killed 17 heroes and crippled 23 more before him. I'm worried about him. He's hiding it behind a smile, but if I were in his place, I'd be angry. Yeah, I'll see if I can talk to him. That much anger, it doesn't do anyone any good. Like you, right? Yep. I want to say something, but I'm not sure what yet. I have an idea. What is it? Ochako asked as he started to head back towards the halls. Meet me by the front gates. I need to take care of something. Fortunately, she was still in her office, but she was handily scared by Izuku suddenly barging in. Recovery girl. I have an idea. OW. Don't scare me like that. My heart's not what it used to be. On Monday, the students were prepped up and ready to go to their internships. Oddly enough, they wouldn't be heading to the train station, but rather UA had prepped transportation beforehand. The primary reasoning was that since the League of Villains was still out there, and their faces were now publicly known, it wouldn't be the best idea to send them on the trains. Also, this was something argued heavily by Cody, who was surprisingly enough becoming a well-listened voice during staff meetings, that the students should be well protected and be able to defend themselves to their maximum ability. As such, they were also allowed to wear their costumes beforehand. While normally, it wouldn't have been considered, the most recent attack by the hero killer had increased concerns as well as the increased crime rate that was slowly, but surely being noted. There was something odd that was noticed by everybody, however, the surprising amount of VOD with them. So, this is something that I forgot to mention, but we're implementing a new program. Aizawa began as some of the clones began to form groups. This was Nisa's idea, but some of the internships have agreed to take some clones along with you to provide training for specific scenarios. They'll be there mostly in the background. The focus is on you after all, but they'll still be participating on some level. The main goal is that through this, they can teach the VOD that are in UA while we coordinate to have instructors for them as well. Aizawa finished. A few were actually excited at seeing the clones coming by with them. One was less excited. 3 guesses as to who. The first 2 don't count. The one clone, who was unfortunate enough to draw the short straw, also huffed, but refused to be cowed by him. Let's just go, Pomeranian. Don't call me a Pomeranian. Aruitai, then. Izuku called for everybody's attention before they left, but paused at seeing Yuga in his costume. Said costume, while painted silver, was obviously not the shiny armor that it was before. The thin metal that served more as an ornament rather than armor had been replaced with custom-painted and fitted armor from the VOD. The reflective mirrors were still in place, but it offered a lot more protection than before. It was heartwarming, and as Fordo walked up to Yuga, also surprised, Fordo gave him a big hug and ruffled his hair, much to the other boys' annoyance. All right, everybody, I want you all to stay safe and come back home. If you need help, don't be afraid to call for it. We've got some new things alongside the VOD coming along with you. They'll explain on the way. Aye, Class Prez. Sure thing, Midoriya. You too, Mandalore. Tenya gulped as he clenched his fist. It would be a lot more difficult to execute his plan with them near him. Tenya. He heard to the side, Izuku coming by in his own costume. Izuku, how are you? I'm fine, but I wish that I could say the same about you. What do you mean?
I'm fine.
I know, Tenya. Tenya shut his mouth with a click, glad that he had his helmet on and that Izuku couldn't see his face. Once the VOD assigned to you were told of the location of your internship, they immediately relayed it to me. Tenya grit his teeth and breathed deeply. So what now? Will you stop me? Do you even know what I'm planning on doing? You want to go after the hero killer, by yourself? You want revenge for your brother? You feel angry at the hero killer and at the world, and you want to take your due. Izuku got close to him and poked his chest. It won't work, he emphasized with each prod. And trust me, bottling up your anger won't do you any favors. Tenya swapped away his hand and loomed over the shorter boy. How do you know it won't? How could you ask me to stand by and do nothing? How could you possibly know how I feel? Tenya shut his mouth as his mind caught up to his words, Izuku looking at him with a raised brow, challenging him to finish that sentence. I am sorry. When I heard what happened to Tensei, I was so afraid, and now I'm just so angry. I hate the hero killer for what he did, and I want to do something, but if your brother couldn't, do you honestly believe that you have a chance? Izuku asked, his question piercing through Tenya's heart. No, I don't. Tenya muttered out in defeat. Izuku then grabbed the ridge of Tenya's helmet and looked him straight in the eyes. Tenya, look at me. Do you remember when you blew out your engines? Yes. Do you know what Recovery Girl told me? No, what did she say? Without Bacta, your recovery wouldn't have been possible. Her quirk only functions on the actual human body. Your engines are different, and blowing them out like that would have set you back by months. Tenya's eyes widened as he gasped in shock. We have Bacta. There's another hero who's had organs ripped out of him, and he's currently undergoing treatment with Bacta. The results are promising. The recovery is slow, but it's there. And that had been a tearful day for all of them when Recovery Girl had shakingly looked at the results and sobbed in pure relief. Tenya started to shake and gripped Izuku's wrist. Don't do this. Don't give me. If it's working for him, then there's a chance, Tenya. Tenya almost fell to his knees were it not for Izuku to hold him up. Soft sobs racked through him as hope filled his heart. Izuku let him be, and the others near them graciously gave them space. Once Tenya got some of it out of his system, he leaned back and Izuku gave him a look. We can't do anything about the internships now, but I want you to know that we're with you, Tenya. And when you go there, I want you to promise me. Promise me that you won't go off on your own like some vigilante after the hero killer. You dedicate your time there to learn how to be a hero and save people. You come back home. Izuku finished before letting go of Tenya's helmet. SNFF, I will. Izuno, Mandalore. I promise. Tenya finished before heading off. After briefly speaking with Aizawa, who nodded at him, Tenya and the two clones who were going with him boarded their vehicle and left. Think he'll be fine, Izuku? He heard Ochako ask from the side after putting on his own helmet. Fine, is something he won't be for a while, but at least he's a bit better. New helmet? I've had it since the beginning, but the VOD have been getting on me about protecting my face. During my last training, they even started to aim for it. And wasn't that an annoying pain to deal with? Smile for the cameras all you like, VOD. But we'd feel a lot better if you protect yourself. The helmet was simple in design, reminiscent of Django's original T-visor, but wider and pointed at the edges and had the ridge that had become staples of the VOD. It was white, but it also had two streaks of green and black along the said ridge. Duty and justice. The clones had been constantly working with Powerloader to optimize their armor, especially for communications after they'd been shut down during the Battle of the USJ. As such, they'd also implemented comlinks into hero student costumes. For those that had helmets, in their helmets, and for those who didn't on their wrists. Aizawa had been all for the idea. It looks good on you. I've got no doubt that anybody who sees you will feel safe. Ochako replied as she fiddled with her comlink. Thank you. Stay safe, all right, Izuku? Ochako pleaded as she hugged him. Izuku did the same, holding her tightly. As they split apart, however, you too, Ochako. Plunk. Izuku's helmet lightly tapped against her visor before he straightened up and walked away. Ochako merely smiled as she walked back to her ride with no clue as to what just occurred. Hashtag VOD. You did not. Hashtag who? Let's go ORI VOD. Hashtag shoot up shut up. The two clones next to her did know what just happened, and now they had to make some plans. Izuku tried to fight down the burn in his cheeks as he focused on the ride ahead of him. He couldn't believe that he'd done that. It was something that Izuku had started with Django long ago when they were kids. They'd just gotten into a fight with Bakugo and were leaning on each other on the way home. They were in too much pain to hug each other, so they tapped their foreheads. It became a symbolic meaning of love. Once they'd gotten their helmets, during every class before the USJ they'd taken to tapping their helmets together. Then the VOD began to get into it, the original terms Kovniner, headbutt, and Mershmirsuai, kiss, turning into a slang word. The Keldabe kiss. The fact that he did that to Ochako and in front of everybody. He was so glad that only the VOD understood what happened. Oh no. Soon enough the entire UA battalion would know. He was so not looking forward to the end of his internship. As it was, however, there was nothing he could do. So he'd focus on the now and concentrate on his internship. Gran Torino, never heard of him, but he's got to be an amazing hero to have trained All Might. Finding an old rundown building didn't leave his hopes up. Opening the door, he saw that the place was dark and dusty. Hello? It's Midoriya Izuku, Mandalore from UA High. Is anyone there? Izuku's adrenaline spiked as he saw the body on the ground, immediately grabbing his gun and opening comms. Red alert. I have a deceased.
I'm Eliv.
Belay that, false alarm. Izuku said as he turned off the comlink. Staring at the old man who was staring at him back while trembling, Izuku could only think of one thing. What have I gotten myself into? Author. Ahahaha. I am here with the end of this chapter. I hope you all enjoyed this. 'Cause it was a pain to be sure. So many good things to go over before we get into the meat of the action with the internships. I hope you all enjoyed the names. This was a bit of a pain to create, but I hope that it was well worth the wait. I've only got one omake, for Darth Kyofu. By the way, I posted a fuller one-shot with various potential scenes/plot points in my other story, The Manifold. Just so you know, the plot points from the previous omacs are also potential, and may or may not be included if Darth Kyofu is ever created. Before AFO's demise. I don't fear you. Katsuma yelled as he faced Kyofu. Then you will die braver than most. He replied as his blade clashed against the young boy's. After only a few hits, however, Katsuma was pushed to the ground, his lightsaber broken in two. The boy shakily looked up as Kyofu raised his blade and flinched in fear. Perhaps I was wrong. It wouldn't be the first time. Kyofu heard a familiar voice say from behind him and turned to face a living memory. Izuku felt something swell inside of him before Kyofu ruthlessly pushed it and him down. It was foretold that you would be here. Our long-awaited meeting has come at last. Kyofu stated as he turned off his lightsaber. I'm glad I gave you something to look forward to. We need not be adversaries. My master will show you mercy if you tell me where the remaining heroes can be found. Kyofu demanded before Ochako furiously replied. There are no more heroes. You and your inquisitors have seen to that. Perhaps this child will confess what you will not. Darth Kyofu threatened as he turned back to a Katsuma who was struggling to back away. I was beginning to believe I knew who you were behind that mask, but it's impossible. My best friend could never be as vile as you. Ochako grimly stated as she stepped forward. Izuku Midoriya was weak. I destroyed him. Ochako let a single tear fall before tempering her resolve. Then I will avenge his death. Revenge is not the hero way. I am no hero. The two readied their blades and Ochako became the first to attack, their blades striking each other in a beautiful dance of death as they blocked, parried, and attacked without hesitation. Eventually, he was able to push her back as Katsuma and Tenya tried to leave the area. Kyofu tried to chase them as the building they were in started to collapse around them and was thus unprepared for Ochako's last desperate attack as she ran at him from behind. Kyofu blocked the first strike but took the second to his helmet. He screamed and collapsed as Ochako tumbled forward. Ochako, come on, hurry. She shakily pushed herself up. Ochako. Her eyes widened in surprise and she turned back. Kyofu was kneeling, smoke coming out of his mask, but he turned towards her. A green eye met her own. Ochako. Izuku. She whispered out as they both stood up. I won't leave you. Not this time. She resolutely stated as they faced each other once more. Izuku could only stare at her in regret, before the eye began to change color, returning to a sickly color as Kyofu began to return. Then you will die. And his lightsaber ignited. Author. Thank you everybody for your continued support. Have a nice day.